Leading today's workshop is Salomon Davila. He's a data and project management specialist who spent the past 2 decades collaborating with community colleges across the state to develop outcome-focused strategies and programs and to provide specialized trainings to those who will implement them. I'll drop his LinkedIn URL in the chat. And so thank you again for your attendance here at the Project Development Workshop. Salomon, take it away.
Thank you very much, Judy, for your intro and everyone's attendance here. This is the culminating workshop. This is or presentation, really, the third and final presentation specific to actually developing what's called a work plan. So the first two was about the ideation of your project, creating a logic model, which is a general outline of what you're intending to do. Secondly, was developing a proposal out of that information, and now you're ready to implement that proposal, and that the work plan is the tool for implementation. So we went from ideation, proposal, and then the final process being the implementation, which is what this is about. And unlike I think in real life, you try to also plan that implementation. So this is done beforehand as well as much as possible for your proposal as you execute that, so that you show your preparedness for executing once implemented or if selected for the project. So what are the objectives? The idea today is, how do we organize what are called work streams that you're going to have out of your proposal, and sequencing of activities, and actually how to do that. I'm going to demonstrate some tools that will help you track some of these activities and execution of those activities. And we're going to discuss a little bit about reporting and how to achieve reporting. And it looks like there's a little typo there with font size, but the goal is how to achieve reporting is the context. And of course, I'm going to demo some tools that you may want to use, some that are free, some that that require some licensing, but I definitely want to demonstrate what it may take for your skill set to actually physically do some of the work that you see here presented. Yeah, any questions before we get started? I can read the chat, and this time I have earphones so that if you want to unmute and ask your question, you can hopefully feel confident that I'm going to hear you this time, unlike the other two presentations. All right. Well, let's get started. So how do we organize work streams and sequencing of activities? So I began this similar like the others to defining what a work plan is. I'm assuming some of you have seen this before in some capacity. I just want to put it sort of like contextually, specifically what a work plan inevitably what it looks like. It's a sequence of activities leading to an objective with a set of timelines, which are important. You have to schedule these. These have to happen in some sort of sequential fashion, and a responsible individual to deliver the conclusion of that activity. So at the end, someone is held accountable for concluding that activity, right? And that deliverable being submitted and verified of its quality and any metrics associated with that needs to be part of the work plan. So the type of things that are included in a work plan row by row are the objectives that you're aligning to. Again, this is part of the logic plan, logic model. This is part of your proposal that's established already. The activity itself, which can come from the logic model, and you'll see what I mean in a moment. But you may want to break down the logic model even to more sub sort of activities. But the point being is that you're going to eventually tie. What's different here is you're going to tie this to a responsible person or an individual. So you may want to break up the activities that you generally have in a logic model to be very specific to an individual here. But it should be quite similar. The metric or deliverable that will be achieved by that activity, the timeline, which is something new here, and how you're going to schedule this. Is it going to happen this month? Is it going to happen this week? Is it going to happen this day? That type of level of detail. The responsible party of that activity. And then, of course, potentially even the status, meaning that it hasn't been started or it's in progress or done, for example, of that particular activity. So that's what a work plan will contain, just broadly speaking. There may be some other categories that are included, but generally these are the categories that you'll have per row per activity. And we'll get into it. Looks something like this. We'll go into the details of the structure of it. And you may see some bars out here, which denote a timeline for that activity, the starting and end point, even if you want to track that when you started the activity, when you ended the activity, so that you know that once it's finished, it kicks off maybe another activity, and that's the sequencing that you may want to play around with in your work plan. So you may be asking, okay, that seems like a lot of extra work. Why do I want to use a work plan? Well, it's a tool that is going to assist all of you in implementing your project, right? You spent a lot of time ideation of the project, refining your objectives, identifying resources, all that great work that you've done. You've been allocated the funding to execute it. Now you need to implement it. So it just assists in making sure that you execute what you essentially said you were going to do. So it allows you to keep track of any activities that you need to schedule. It helps you keep track of any performed deliverables that you're meant to submit. It also keeps track of you achieving the outcomes that you set forth to achieve. And then finally, and something more practical, it helps you for any contracts or any invoicing that you may want to perform. So in your proposal, you may want to denote certain outside work outside of your purview, and you want to then use that work plan to essentially use in your deliverable of a contract if it's a third party that you're budgeting to help you in your project. So literally it comes off of your existing work plan to submit for your business office to execute a RFA and eventually a contract to any third parties. So very practical type of activities a work plan can help all of you develop. However, we spent so much time in developing a logic model and a proposal. How does this fold into the work plan? And I already kind of addressed this a little bit. Well, if you recall in your proposal, you have processes and procedures that you want to specify. And I mean, in that part of the presentation, that's just part of your internal workings of either your college or your region. You want to denote the mechanisms for how you're going to execute your project. And so you want to include those in your work plan, right? You have to actually schedule when you're going to engage with said processes and procedures. So that's going to be a direct one-to-one. And if you recall, I specified what's called the project charter, which is essentially the outline of your proposal for practical reasons. But it's usually called the project charter, just again, the outline in which you have like your objectives, which you've already transferred over from your logic model. But in your charter, you also have things like success criteria, right? This is how you use your metrics that you submitted and then transform them into like, this is what I consider to be success. This is what we're delivering on at this quality. And then if you recall in your proposal, identifying internal, external stakeholders and all that sort of process of identifying them and calling them out in the proposal and how you're going to engage with the stakeholders. You may want to, again, denote the activities of how you're going to communicate to the stakeholders, when you're going to report to the stakeholders, how you're going to engage the stakeholders. Those are all activities as well that you have to schedule and outline within your work plan. So that you can use your proposal literally to transfer that into activity or much more tangible deliverables of anything that's in your product chart. And then lastly, your logic model, which is your ideation of your proposal. Objectives come directly in their general activities. And when these may be a little bit broader, but nonetheless, these can be brought over one-to-one or broken down into very specific activities from a general activity that you have in your logic model. The metrics and deliverables also one-to-one. And if you recall, there's a section in your logic model of all the resources that you're going to be needing. Well, that may or may not be like the responsible person or responsible entity that inevitably will be in your work plan. That may be a resource that you already have called out in your logic model as well. Not necessarily, but it'd be good to denote that if possible. Maybe in your logic model, you'll include things like faculty would be the resource, but potentially in your work plan, you actually name the given faculty at your local college. Any questions of how we may use previous developments of the logic model and proposal to create your work plan?
Salomon, you showed us a Gantt chart for the project, laying out the project steps, the milestones, or are there other types of tools that are equally as useful?
Yeah, absolutely. I will definitely give you a process on how to sequence such tools, because getting to the Gantt chart, as you saw there, is kind of like the last step, but definitely I wouldn't recommend to start with that just because it's just too much, I think, to take in. You'll see a tool in a moment.
Okay.
Okay, which comes into that question. Thank you for the lead-in. How do we begin creating the sequenced events? Well, that's called a work breakdown. That's what the term is called. And I may recommend things like a post-it or a mind map, or creating a hierarchy map diagram, which is if you used a PowerPoint or Google Slides, which is what I'm using here, and I literally use a Google Slide, you can create a hierarchy map. But the point is to create a map of all the different activities that you've drawn from your logic model, that you've drawn from your proposal, and start with that. Start with writing these down as an individual task, a contained task itself, in one of these forms as you start breaking down the work breakdown, right? That's why it's called that. And then after that, you create it into a tabular format, which is what Mike just asked, using the Gantt chart, where essentially each row represents one of those post-its or one of those activities that you just finished developing. And of course, every row has all the column attributes that you saw earlier: the objective, the activity name, who's responsible, what's the deliverable, what's the timeline. All that detail are just columns within the tabular representation of those activities. So how does it look like? It looks something like this. So you have different objectives that you're trying to reach. Each objective may have a phase. So this is optional, but just to show you that there may be phases within each objective that you may want to categorize, like maybe you're doing, let's say, for example, you're doing an outreach to students for your new program. So outreach may be an objective. The first phase may be like, well, you have to understand the knowledge that students may have about your current program. So maybe it's a survey would be the first phase of understanding what they currently have, and then later on developing the outreach effort with the information that you obtain from a survey, right? Those would be two general phases for an example like outreach to students. And then below, this is the actual individual activities, which would be the individual post-its, or in this example, a little terminal box, or they call them leaves sometimes, because like in a tree, right, you have the trunk, you have branches, and then you have the leaf being the very end of the tree. And so these are typically called leaves in a hierarchy like this. So a leaf is the end, and those essentially would be your activities that will have all the content that are necessary that you're going to put into rows later on in a tabular format. You can use Excel, you can use other fancy tools that create Gantt charts, as was mentioned. Those are optional, but definitely you go from this version to then the tabular version. The hierarchy version to the tabular version would be what my recommendation for your assistance. Hopefully that answered your question, Mike. And so any questions with this idea of structuring it in this fashion? And this is up to you. And notice a couple little details too. I have objective 1 and then objective 2. It's normally recommended to track your leaves, your activities, by some sort of numerical identifier, right? So if you notice, each activity has a different number because they're based off of the hierarchy that you see here. Objective 2, phase 2.1, meaning it's phase 2 of objective 2, but it's the first phase of project 2. And then notice activity is is activity 2 of phase 1 of objective 2, right? So it's an identifier for that activity. And so the enumeration of activity corresponds to the identifier of where it sits in the broader scheme of things. Yeah, so that's something a little detailed to keep track of all these activities that you're scheduling. All right, so obviously the template in your work plan may look something like this. Again, these are all the columns for each row, the objective, the phase, if any, right? That's optional, but I recommend to kind of, create phases that make sense to you, the activity itself, the deliverable, the dates that are going to be representing that. It could, again, the start and end date is possible, or just a single day is possible. Who's responsible for delivering that, and the status of it, and then any notes that you may want to track. Okay, so this is just the, again, general workings of a work plan, a little bit of the reasons why to have one and how it may help you, how to construct it. I think we're going to go into the actual tools themselves and what they provide. If you've used some of these, I think you recognize, oh yeah, that I can use it for this or the other. So I'll talk a little bit about the tools and then actually show you some end products from such tools so that you can see how the work plan can literally help you communicate your project and even use it for what I call enlisting individuals to help you in your project and completing your project. And I wanted to kind of transition into how you activate your work plan to be an actual, almost like a motivational tool, if you will, of your project. But before I do that, any questions regarding the actual construction of the work plan? I want to pause there because now you're going to see the more technical side of it. All clear?
All clear, nothing in the chat.
Great, well, thank you. So some of the things that I recommend of using is Google Slides and Google Sheets. For example, I think I can quickly create a new slide here just to show you how sort of quick and easy in Google Slides, which is a free product that probably many of you use for your courses and communication within your college. If you go under Insert, Diagram, Hierarchy, you can literally choose how many levels, which is like top level, phasing, and the activity. And you can get even more specific with the level. I just take the top level there. Choose whatever format it is you think you need. I'll stick this line 1 there. And that gets you started, right? So you can start, putting in some of these things and moving them around if need be and copying them. And it does a good job of tracking them and putting lines there if you need to add them. Like, there's a way to right click and then I think add another link somewhere or something like that, or just copy and paste. So this is one way if you just want to work through the slide deck here that you see for Google Sheet. And then of course, Google Slides. And then the Google Sheet is just an Excel version of, you would transfer the information manually from your hierarchy into the Google Sheet with the headers that you saw here in the template there. A much more sophisticated solution is a tool called Smartsheet, which is a project management tool in itself, a full product that is minimal cost for a user. I've used it for many, many years, and to I think a level of success that I've been able to automate a lot of things. So you can see here, this is the phase that I'm calling out, so regional employer and career connection opportunities, the different tasks that are listed in here. They're all, you can see the embedding of certain subtasks that Smartsheet allows me to do. In Excel, it's a little bit harder to do that. I know it can be done to nest rows, but typically you're just contained to like one level in Excel, unless you're very familiar with Excel and how to do this sort of nesting that Smartsheet pretty much has out of the box. So you can see a little bit of structure for the activities, and then later on, any outcomes, if I call that out, and then the start and finish date, the duration, and then who's responsible, who's leading that activity, and if it's completed or not. So you can see there's several people called out for certain activities and whether or not it was that task was completed. And if there's a metric that we're collecting for that activity, which I don't know if I have any here in this one here, but in others, there may be metrics. I don't have some of these fully developed, as you can see, but I use this as a template. Maybe the professional development, no. I'm looking at other sort of phases that are called out here. You can see the status. I have things in red if they're not completed. So Smartsheet is another tool that you may want to use to track your work plan. And then to visualize your work plan, you have tools like Tableau or ClickData, which are visualizations of that tabular information, right? Because even this may be a little dense to look at just for someone to kind of sift through row by row. It's too much information, concentrated. So you may want different ways of looking at it. Just to flex a little bit more on the Smartsheet, if you care to use it, it actually does have the Gantt view that was talked about earlier, which denotes if there's any sequencing of it. I don't even think I have this one activated. This is probably not the best example for a Gantt view, but that's included in here. And what's called a card view. A card view is one in which you can select by status or by lead, like who's responsible. So let's go by lead. And then I know that I'm responsible for 41 of those tasks. Sherry was responsible for 4, and Nancy was responsible for 7. And so you can see the reorganization of the data instead of just by row, which is the activity, actually doing it by responsible person so that someone can look at this and sort of just look at their column if necessary and just focus on their specific tasks if you care to share this with your team, and they can update you through this process as well. So that's what's called the card view, that Smartsheet allows you to visualize your data differently. And then even calendar, so you can look at different information that may be more viewable as a calendar date, especially if you're gonna want to focus on, like, what am I focused on this month? You can see all the different activities that you're focusing on in a given month. So that's sort of the flexibility that a tool like Smartsheet would provide in this work plan development deliverable. I'll demonstrate the visualizations afterwards with ClickData, but I wanted to pause there to see if there's any input. Anyone else has used any other tool? I think Monday is another project management tool that is out there that people have used. Microsoft Project, I think, is another tool that's out there. Jira is another one that's out there. Anyways, there's other tools out there that help you organize yourself and achieve the same thing as you're seeing here. So I invite you to take a look at what makes sense for you and your budget and your flexibility to incorporate this into your project. All right, so moving on from work plan, how do you communicate achievement of your work plan, right? This is really all in the sense of transparency across all your project stakeholders. Like, I do think this is important, especially for some of you that may be leading these projects. One thing I can share with all of you is that, you're working with individuals that have busy schedules, they have other tasks they need to be doing. Obviously, all of you are here listening to this webinar, so you had to give up something today to be here, which I understand and appreciate for that level of attention. You're going to be faced with similar situations. And so the more transparency that you include in your project to say, okay, here's where I'm at, here's what hasn't been done, here's what will be done, will allow for people to engage with you in a I think a more honest transaction process. Let me give you an example. Instead of you emailing someone, hey, can you submit this? And then be like, oh, that's another piece of work that I need to do. I'll get to it when I get to it, right? That's the result. Instead of doing that, saying, hey, here's where we're going, here's where we're at, here's what's been achieved, it hasn't been achieved. Can you help me, move this marker a little bit closer to that marker, right? You can point to something that they can they can help you with. And that's a bit more of an enlisting someone to help you complete something, right? And that sort of, you can use the work plan to enlist individuals to help you complete something versus the task being perceived as something they need to do, right? Which is seen a bit more, maybe not as welcoming as them helping you achieve something. That's the transparency that I think will help you with this. It will also help you include in any reporting activities that you perform off your work plan, right? How much completion are you? Are you on track? Are you behind schedule, right? That's okay if you're behind schedule, just that you know that you're behind schedule may inform you how you have to speed up the work. You may want to also include templates. Make it, so the point being is for reporting activities, making some of the templates such that it's easier for your partners to give you information is part of, I think, this process of transparency. So include templates, include pre-filled forms, include things like checkboxes. Just checkbox this, checkbox that, and know that they're going to give you 1 of 3 responses, for example, and make it easy for them so that they just click and they respond to your inquiry, and then you're off and going, right? I've noticed that helps, that increases the input of data into my work plan completion. And you also may want to consider what are called value systems to assist your partners. So what does that mean? So instead of asking your partners, how many students have you convened to talk about your new program, right? Give me a number. You know, like that could be a question that you may get from, maybe many of you have gotten from another project to say, how many students have you convened for your new program, right? Give me a number. Instead of doing that, offer creating a regional event to talk about programs and use Eventbrite to register the students for that event. It could also be an online event. So it helps in organizing your region. It helps promoting your program. But as a consequence, you can actually quantify how many students attended that particular session, which will help you in your metric. So, right, so this is what I mean by a value-added system to assist your partners and at the same time capturing the data that you need to have to show that you're progressing your project forward. Potentially within online meetings, have interactive survey tools. A lot of you are familiar with Zoom. Zoom has questions that can be asked interactively. There's another tool that I'm not prepared to demo, but I use quite a bit. Is called polleverywhere.com. Poll Everywhere allows you to do interactive surveys so that as you're presenting, people are responding and they can see the real-time responses. So it's interactive. Students or whomever you're presenting to, faculty, employers, can interact with you, and then at the same time, you're collecting the data that you're going to use for your work plan and metrics and such. Also consider outside metrics that you can collect that are accessible in most part. Usually the college course schedules will show you whether or not they're offering courses. And even though it's not the full registration of the students, like it may not be the final number of students who finish the course, there may be some attrition in there, but at least to give you a sense of like, okay, we have 300 available seats for this program. And that's what's scheduled in these course schedules across the partners. And so you can start measuring that as a successful implementation of your program, of your project, sorry. LARC also produces a lot of reporting, as you know. There's a lot of great folks giving you metrics, giving you information. You can create surveys that you ask your partners to embed in their course shell so that it becomes like a first step that you capture data from students that are participating in your said project to find out information of their background, what their goals are, and maybe what they want to achieve as they enter a program. And same thing, you can do something at the post exit and working within your project and your faculty there to put that in their course shells would be a really good methodology to capture some of the data that you need. And then also your local institutional research offices that many of you have access to. Sometimes a specific project like this is, I could give you my experience, it's a little bit too specific for an institutional research office to perform because they're mostly focusing on larger college-wide sort of data. But if you do get an opportunity to get some time, I recommend to engage with them, see if you can get specific data for your specific program that you're attempting to implement there at your college. So all of these things are about transparency and reporting. So what does it look like in real life? So let's take a look at some examples of projects that I've been involved with and how they track this information. So for example, for metrics in the cloud project, all of you are able to click on the link, by the way, it's on the sheet itself. You can see that I tracked the schedules by term, and these are all the partners that were involved, or most of them. And I showed here how cumulatively we were all contributing to the enrollment of the regional project collectively, right? And so this is sort of a project level view, visualization of basically college schedules that they were presenting publicly in each individual college. So, you know, it took me maybe, I don't know, an hour, 2 hours to go through each and every college schedule and log in as a student, or the public version, look up the courses, and then later on I had them all bookmarked so I can do it much quicker. It took me much less later, but this really helped because it showed how we were all achieving our objective of enrollments of the course. And then when I would talk to individual colleges, I would show them their total contribution that they were producing. And this slide always brought up a lot of questions, depending whom you were, and you were like, wait a minute, this college is doing better than us, we better step it up. And so a little bit of healthy competition is always nice to bring forth. And, you know, this is just transparency of what each college is adding to their schedule of courses. Anyway, so that's one example for enrollment. Another example is the metric of surveys. Sorry, another example is the data of surveys that you may want to include in a course shell for your students. So similar project for the cloud, and notice we surveyed over 129. This is an active call that I'm doing to the data that I'm accessing. You can see the major breakdowns. You can see the background for the students. Most of them are high school, but not all of them. If you look at the other categories, and this is what really changed the nature of this project, when they realized, wow, the next group of students in our enrollments have bachelor's degrees. You know, so these are people that are coming back for training, not only the bachelor's but also certification, and even specifically the bachelor's technical and the bachelor's non-technical presented an interesting so what's that, 13 and 20%? So 33%, a third of the students, generally speaking, already had a baccalaureate degree coming into the cloud program, which gave a sense to the faculty, okay, they have backgrounds, let's improve in providing some value add to those folks that are coming to get reskilled and retrained, right? And so we really were able to meet the need of these retrained individuals by just knowing the fact that many of them already have baccalaureate degrees. And then all of these, I invite you to look through it. That's why I put them here. These are all survey questions that are presented in this fashion that were used at different moments when I would touch base with a group. And I would show this to demonstrate that many people are coming here that are non-technical and they want to get retrained. So don't make your courses too IT specific, because 65% of your students don't have any IT background. Right, and that just gives a context to the faculty so that when you propose professional development, when you propose interventions, presentations of the program, you color it with this information. Like, you know who your stakeholder is, and you start building what's called a persona of the student that's coming into your particular program. Really helped in that regard. Who's interested in certifications and what pathways are represented. And these are the different occupations that the students are claiming that they're interested in, right? And lastly, the other reporting that I have here is the status of the achieved outcomes of a project. This is another one that I participated in. This was a statewide project. And so the home screen is literally every single one of these icons is an objective. We have to have students in maker spaces, how many courses, how much time, how much funding, how many employers, how many internships, how much money, how many faculty. All of these represent an objective. And so this is how I presented it to the group. And after the collection of that, we looked at individual college metrics. So you can select a college, and you can see how Allen Hancock College, how many employers they recruited, how many students they recruited, how many internships were developed across all quarters. Notice I even have the time frame of the work plan all selected for them. But if I just wanted to look at a specific quarter, like the last quarter, which is towards the end, you can just look at the last quarter, which interestingly enough is when they produced the majority of their work, because the previous quarters they were building up to some of this work, right? And that's okay. The point being is that Allen Hancock or any other colleges can see their progress over time, which is what this tool is meant to help, and what the work plan, which is what they went by, their work plan and how they were executing and reporting the metric. I literally just, as they were filling in the work plan, I just fed it into this tool that visualizes it and quantifies it and makes it the whole thing transparent to everybody. And then lastly, these are quarterly metrics. I think these are just like the split by quarter, so they can see which quarters are better than others. There was one interesting insight that I wanted them to see here, like the employers recruited, I think was one. So at the very beginning, these employers were recruited, which inevitably translated into internships towards the end. So I wanted them to see that you got to put in the legwork to recruit employers little by little throughout, so that at the very end you have enough employers to execute internships. So you can see this good progression. Let me bring in all of them. I think you see it much clearer here when I include all colleges. The recruitment of employers, had to happen way before the internships, which happened. There's a lag in that metric, right? And you can see that the effort in one translates to the completion of the other. So that's a nice way that you can, again, enlist people to help you achieve the outcomes of your project. All right, I'll stop there because this is I wanted to stop for any questions regarding work plan development, what goes in it, how you can use it. Inevitably, it's about implementation, but it's the work plan needs to be developed or planned out, obviously, as best as possible from your proposal and logic model to help you then get to the level of detail of achievement, as you saw here in some of these visualizations at the end. At this point, I'll conclude this last and final webinar and open it up for questions.
Solomon, this has been really useful, and thank you for putting all three presentations on the same PowerPoint. That's going to be helpful to refer back. If we have additional questions, did I hear you right saying that we can reach out to you?
Feel free to email me for sure, Mike, if you have any questions regarding the information on these slides. You can see the examples that I've developed throughout the years, and I may have given the context to this. I was an administrator at a community college responsible for some major grants, and when I asked my higher level administration, there's like, I need help at managing these projects. What do I use? Let's just say I was given insufficient information. And so I went outside and sought other credentialed sources that help you manage a lot of the delivery of projects, and what much of what was useful in that training is what I put here. So hopefully this helps out all of you in the shape or form, and in the educational space, which I'm familiar with, and something that I found to be lacking some of this construct, to use this as just tools to help you execute what all of your great ideas that we all have great, excellent ideas, but executing them is a different question, and hopefully this helps.
And if I can just add, the guidance document has been added to the LARC website under Strong Workforce. In the guidance document you'll find the links to connect you to the workshop resources that have been shared. I'm also dropping into the chat a link that takes you directly to a folder inside our Google Drive where we're also keeping this stuff centralized. So should you need to go back and refer to any of the information that's been shared with you from this or the previous workshops, we've tried to make sure that this is easily accessible to you in multiple locations so that you have the tools and resources that you need.
Well, thank you. I think this is great for projects, but I'm also probably going to be using it for just planning out our annual calendar of events that we have to do for enrollment and other things. I think it'll be useful for that as well.
Also, I know that some of the colleges, I'm not sure if all of them, have provided Smartsheet accounts already. So you might want to check with your college to see if you don't have access to Smartsheets, if you can, if that's something that they've been involved in. So one tool that you might not know you have that you can potentially access today even.
Nice. Any other questions?
Thank you, Solomon, this was great.
Okay.
This is amazing. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, JB. I know you and I participated in some of those projects that I started learning a lot of this from, so. Well, thank you, everybody. Feel free to reach out. Good luck. I believe in all of you. And
Thank
have a great afternoon.
Thank you
Bye,
very much.
everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Solomon.